The Swiss alchemist Paracelsus, who's also sometimes known as Theophrastus and Bombastus, said that everything is poison and nothing is poison. And he was referring to dose, the factor of dosage, that many things can be poisonous in excessive doses and not especially poisonous in very, very small doses. But make no bones about it, the substances that we'll be talking about in this next hour are very, very poisonous. They are deadly, and it's very, very easy to overdose. So, but there is a didactic purpose for talking about things that are so poisonous. Datura-like drugs are very useful for looking at cross-cultural contexts because they're used in a wide range of different cultures and across a very, very long span of time. So what I want to show with these Datura-like substances is that drugs are really chameleons that take on the characteristics of the culture that they're in and get put to the uses of the cultural agenda of the people who are using them. So the main substances that I'll be talking about are the deliriants, also known as anticholinergics, because of their antagonism of acetylcholine. The major ones that have been historically important are ones from plants, especially atropine, which was originally isolated from Tropobelladonna, scopolamine, which was initially isolated from Scopolia carnicola, and hyoscyamine, which was initially isolated from Hyoscyamus niger. For purposes of comparison, all of these compounds are known as tropane compounds, but cocaine is also a tropane compound as well. So I have cocaine down there. Very, very small differences in the structure result in extremely vast differences in the effects of these drugs. So even though they're structurally related, whereas cocaine is euphoric, these substances are not. They have their own properties, which I'll discuss as we go over some of the uses in different societies that they've been put to. They can be used for amusement. And this is not only amusement from people who ingest them, but amusement from people who make other people ingest them. So this is the classic. This is Della Porta, a Renaissance writer, who used to basically dose people with it because he found it amusing. So he wrote, "When you would use it, give it to somebody to drink, and whosoever shall taste it after a deep sleep will be distracted, and for a day shall rave. But after some sleep will return to his senses again without any harm. And it is very pleasant to behold. Pray make trial." This is extremely irresponsible. Della Porta believed that when people ate Datura, or Nightshade, or any of the other plants in the Solanaceae family that contain these delirium-inducing substances, they would turn into whatever they'd been eating recently. So if they'd been eating beef, they would think they were a cow and they would wander around lowing, or if they'd just eaten fish, they'd flop around on the ground. So this was his belief. He was also very, very keen on the science of phrenology as well, and thought that people had all kinds of strange characteristics related to animals. He was fairly obsessed with that. But they have also been used in very small doses for pleasure. Usually put into smoking mixtures, and smoking is much safer than orally ingesting these things. And particularly in India, they've been used as aphrodisiacs and pleasure enhancers, but always in small doses and in smoking formulations. So they can be used for enjoyment. And also, this fellow, Mika Lin, is currently making a liqueur from mandrake fruits, which contain these compounds. So here he is in his mandrake field. One of the most important of these plants is henbane. This is black henbane, Hyoscyamus niger. It's been very important in religion and magic and medicine in Europe. There are a lot of different species of Hyoscyamus, and they're all really beautiful, I find. This is Hyoscyamus aureus, Hyoscyamus reticulatus. And they extend through Europe and Asia, the Middle East and Asia, into Central Asia. And they're related to other things that are also delirium-inducing, like this Physoclina. This is Physoclina orientalis. Really beautiful plant, very, very rare in cultivation, but there are some around. So some of these Asiatic henbane relatives aren't particularly well known, but this is... which one's this? This is also a Physoclina. This is Physoclina physaloides, and it shows a kind of a... It has these swollen balloons that are typical of the genus. And there's some very rare Central Asian henbanes that are basically like this, but then sort of shrunk down, telescoped back to the bare minimum. This is a little rosette of stuff with these swollen calyxes with the seed pods. So this is something called Przewalskia tangutica, which is used in herbal medicine. These plants they have a long history of use in medicine. In Ayurvedic medicine and Tibetan medicine, they're used as painkillers, as hypnotics and sedatives, and also as antiparasitics, but I don't know what sort of parasite they're supposed to treat. I haven't been able to find that out. But their pedigree in medicine is well attested. These are amongst the great medical writers who have endorsed its use for various conditions. Dioscorides, the Greek physician, Avicenna, and Gerard. And these are specimens of their texts where they endorse these nightshades with these belladonnoid compounds. The compounds are sometimes called belladonnoids because they're known from Atropa belladonna, but they're also called deliriants well, I don't know, I'm wondering. Atropa belladonna, the deadly nightshade, is one of the more important of these plants in European history. It looks like the familiar garden nightshade, the black nightshade, but they're really quite different. This is Atropa belladonna's fruit, and the fruits of and the flowers of Atropa belladonna, and these are the common garden nightshades. So they're quite different, really. Even though the berries look similar, and the berries are very poisonous, but also rather tasty, which makes them dangerous for children. Yeah, what's that?
If people want to look at them.
Oh, what are they?
They are tasty, aren't
These are Atropa belladonna berries?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Oh, well, could you... there they are, but do you want to pass them around? Or what?
Yeah,
Yeah. Just don't nibble, even though they're tasty. So, Atropa belladonna is named for a divinity, Atropos, one of the three fates in Greek mythology. This is a woman, and this is a representation of her life from her youth and her fertility to her being cut down in old age. And these are the goddesses of fate: Clotho, who spins the thread of life; Lachesis, who measures the span of life; and Atropos, who snaps the thread of life. So they're very, very serious plants, for the whole genus to be named after this goddess who breaks the thread of life. Atropa belladonna is called belladonna because belladonna means beautiful, beautiful woman. It was widely used by women in the Middle Ages and in the Renaissance to enhance their beauty by putting drops into their eyes so that their pupil would dilate. They'd have this intense mydriatic response, and they look absolutely beautiful. And they would no doubt also stumble into objects because they wouldn't be able to see where they were going, but they did look beautiful. And here is Leonardo da Vinci's famous picture of a woman with her pet ermine. Looking ravishing. Scopolia carnicola, from which scopolamine was originally isolated. The plant is not often grown in Australia, but it's extremely pretty. Scopolamine, I might also say that these kind of alkaloids are also used for eye examinations as well. Scopolamine is used for motion sickness. So it's a very, very effective remedy for motion sickness, either transdermal or as tablets. So these things have very definite uses. And it was once used to induce a twilight sleep. Women of this generation would undergo scopolamine morphine semi-narcosis during labour. That's the title of this book. So a lot of people were born, no doubt, with these kinds of delirium-inducing compounds flowing through their systems, last century and the century before. And these compounds are also antidotes for certain toxins, some nerve gases, and famously for physostigma, the calabar or deal bean. So it drives the system, the poison drives the system the opposite way to the poisons in these beans and in some nerve gases. While they are medicines, they are very easily employed to kill, and they've been used extensively in hunting. Here in Australia, Duboisia myoporoides has been used to poison waterholes so that animals like emus would drink it and become stupefied and easy to catch. So they can be used for hunting. And they can, here are some really beautiful Australian Solanaceae that contain tropane alkaloids of the type that we're talking about. I think this is Anthotroche paniculata and Cythamphora species of some kind. And the West Australian coastal ray flower, Anthocercis littoria, or littoralis actually. All good sources of tropane alkaloids, of scopolamine-like alkaloids. And they can also be used to hunt people. And this is particularly a problem in Colombia, where it's called barandanga, which I think means devil's breath. Scopolamine can be blown into people's faces to narcotize them while they're robbed. Often they cooperate in the robbery because people become very suggestible under the influence of scopolamine. Here's someone who's basically made a profession of poisoning people, saying, whatever, we give them scopolamine. The scopolamine in Colombia mostly comes from the Brugmansia sanguinea. It's a major crop there for scopolamine production. It's a major source of scopolamine. And if someone's been poisoned by scopolamine, then they go into this kind of, it can be extremely life-threatening. This woman has had too much of a pharmaceutical drug called diphenhydronate, which is used for travel sickness and for other applications. But she's had too much of it. She was probably, trying to have an intense experience, and she is very ill at the moment. Now, we went over this last night. David went over this last night, and I've probably got the old version. I have, because I've got the Mercury Poisoning version. This was discussed last night. But this is basically the anticholinergic toxidrome, but we went over that. It's not a pleasant space to be, really. And the use of these things as ways of poisoning people is fairly widespread. It's not just Colombia, but it's also famously practiced in India. And in India, there are some fairly sophisticated preparations. One of my favourites is where Datura metal leaves, this is Datura metal, the leaves were fed to caterpillars, and the caterpillars act as bioprocessors and produce droppings that are really highly concentrated poisons. So yeah, drugging people with caterpillar poisons. And as I mentioned before, these substances can increase suggestibility, so they've been used to interrogate people. People are much, it was explored for a while. The idea was that with the scopolamine, people would be in such a delirious, impressionable state that they would tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But unfortunately, fortunately actually, that didn't really work very well. Because people aren't particularly articulate under the influence of scopolamine. So although they might be trying to tell the truth, it comes out as, or something like that. They've also been used in espionage. This radio station, Radio Free Europe, a former Czechoslovakian Secret Service agent, admitted to having snuck in there and taken the salt canister and filled it with atropine sulfate in an attempt to destabilize this Radio Free Europe. On a more organized scale, substances related to the Datura compounds have been developed as weapons of war. The US Army developed this substance, which is usually called BZ, and tested it as a incapacitant, a way to make people, well, they wouldn't have to blow them up because they wouldn't be able to do anything. So they rationalized that this was actually an ethical practice because you weren't actually shooting people. But it was not a pleasant compound because it also lasts much longer than the plant-based deliriants. It takes a while to come on too. It's not immediate. It's nowhere near as rapid, but it lasts a long time. And so there are reports of these. This is the doctors, the nurses, the volunteers from the US Army who were going to test it. This is a volunteer checking his own pupil size. There are stories of these volunteers wandering around, talking to water fountains, trying to write their names on little pieces of chicken meat. They've also been used to basically make people placid enough to be buried alive. The Mocha people in Peru, an ancient warlike people, when their king died, they would bury their king, and then they would drug the king's wives, and then they would drug the household slaves. All of whom apparently agreed to it, but seems rather unlikely to me. In Haiti, there's some evidence from Wade Davis that people who are... Wade Davis seems to have uncovered a complex where people can be poisoned with tetrodotoxin containing fish extracts, and this will slow their metabolism so they seem to be dead. They're then buried, and then the poisoner digs them up, drugs them with tree daturas, Brugmansia, and uses them as cheap labor. So these are the zombies, yeah, this is the zombie concept. The person is first drugged with tetrodotoxin, taken for dead, buried, dug up, and then kept completely zombified. And so not only do they kill people, these compounds, not only do they kill people and then keep them zombies, but they can also kill magically. I want to talk about some of the superstitious uses of these compounds. So we've looked at medicine, healing, hunting, war, and magic, because these things excite the imagination as well. They are catalysts for the religious imagination. This is a tantric practitioner, a Raja of some kind, who is a tantric practitioner, and he has a Datura metal flower on his head. And there is a yoni lingam here and a Datura metal on the top of the lingam as well. There's some confusion about whether Datura is a New World species, an Old World species, or whether it's exclusively New World, that's to say from the Americas, or whether it existed in Africa and Asia and Europe. And there's very good evidence now, I think, that it basically was in both places. There are there are tracks from at least the 11th century that are tantric tracks that use the word, and the word exists in 20 or so languages related to Sanskrit that are fairly widespread on the Indian subcontinent. But they don't refer to anything else, and all the other solanaceous plants have their own names in their various languages. So Datura, which is where our word Datura comes from, Dutra or Dadra, is something that is probably, was in the Old World before the 11th century. But there's still debate about that. In terms of magical applications of these plants, well, the mandrake is absolutely it. It has so much superstition associated with it. This is from the Harry Potter film. This is Professor Sprout pulling up a mandrake. And these are various figures of the mandrake, which has a root. Really, it's a lot more like that than it is like that. But the mandrake's been used, well, people have come up with all sorts of crazy things. It's often been associated with demons. These are demons in a Hieronymus Bosch painting coming out of a mandrake fruit. And this is a detail from a painting by Jean Bruegel the Elder. And it's a depiction of Orpheus in the underworld. And this is a little mandrake fruit demon running up here into the air. And all sorts of really delirious stuff happening around it. So I'd be fairly sure that painters like Bosch and the various Bruegels knew of this possibly experientially, knew of these delirium effects. It was a common additive to beer, was henbane, before the Bavarian Beer Purity Act. This is the plant, Mandragora officinarum, the major mandrake of Europe. I'm just going to go through a few of the other ones because I just think they're lovely. Mandragora autumnalis, more Mediterranean, North African, Middle Eastern, but overlapping in range. Another Mandragora autumnalis, but a really different form from Turkey. And the rare Tibetan mandrake, Mandragora coalescens, which is absolutely beautiful. Dark purple flowers, really gorgeous thing. The mandrake has an extremely ancient history as well. Here is a drawing of it's a carving on the side of an ivory box from Tutankhamun's tomb of a woman picking mandrake fruits, which were believed to be aphrodisiac and also fertility enhancing. Here are a whole heap of stuff. These are the mandrake fruits. They're green here. They do ripen to a reddish or yellowish colour. Here's a pectoral thing, like a thing with mandrake fruits on it. And this is a ring of Tutankhamun. It's one of Tutankhamun's rings with mandrake fruits on the side of it. This is the goddess Hathor being offered beer. She's associated closely with beer. Now there's a story that Ra, the sun god, was at one stage very angry with humanity and decided to punish us. And the way that he did this was he asked Hathor to turn into a lion and to go around eating people just to, put the fear of gods into us. So she did that. She went around devouring people and gobbling them up and stuff. But she developed an insane lust for blood. And the gods became really worried that humanity was going to disappear because this lion goddess was going around eating everyone. So they decided to trick her by getting a whole heap of beer and putting a whole heap of mandrake into it so that it would be narcotic and stupefying, and then mixing it with red ochre so that it looked like blood, and leaving it out for the goddess. And of course she found it and gobbled it all up, and after that she fell asleep, and when she woke up she didn't feel like eating anyone ever after that. And since then she's been a goddess of beer, amongst other things. Mandrake fruits being offered. And this is this relates to the biblical story of Rachel and Leah, and I think it was Leah's son, can't remember his name, found some mandrake fruits in the field and brought them home to his mum. But Rachel really wanted them, but Leah wanted to sleep with Rachel's husband. So Leah and Rachel swapped the mandrake fruit for a night with Jacob? I think it's Jacob. Anyway, so there's one of the first drug deals in the Bible. One of the first drug deals for sex and involving stealing your stash of your son. So you steal your son's stash so that it's just sordid. Circe, the enchantress from Homer's Odyssey, holding some delirium-inducing potion that she's got there. She uses it to turn men into pigs and deers and swines and ibises and all sorts of puppy dogs and things, really, and there's owls and birds and stuff. So this is the story from Homer's Odyssey. And here's Homer sort of chasing after her because she couldn't turn him into an animal. Now, people often, we saw earlier that there was this fellow, Batista Della Porta, who thought that if you drug people with these, they seem to think that they turn into animals. Well, this is the classical Greek kind of version of that, that you take these things and you just don't know what you are, really. But Odysseus could resist this enchantment because he'd been given another herb by the god Hermes. And this herb, it is now speculated that this herb was something that actually acts as an antidote to the anticholinergic syndrome. This is Galanthus nivalis, I think, the snowdrop. And it actually does reverse a lot of the symptoms of anticholinergic poisoning. So it's possible that he was able to resist the enchantment because he had an antidote to the drug that was used to create the enchantment. So this is a theory now, although I think it's more likely to have been another emerillid. These are in the Emerilidaceae family, called Pancratium maritimum, which also has the same alkaloid, galanthamine, and it also reverses the anticholinergic syndrome, but it also grows on the beach, which is, like the Odyssey is a story about roaming around in ships in the Greek Isles, basically. So this seems a more likely candidate to me because it has the same substance, but it's in the right habitat. Now, the idea of pulling out mandrakes using these really complicated rituals, tying them to dogs and making sure that you don't hear the root scream as it comes up, is a very Greek thing that seems to be this part of the Mandragora lore, I would say, comes from ancient Greece, because Greek witches were always doing these elaborate rituals and blocking their ears, or swearing was a big one. Absolutely swearing blind, just go while you pull something up. Apparently, that's the right way to do it, or it was considered that way. Now, these are Roman witches, the witches of a place called Larissa, and this is from. What is this one from? Well, it's Roman anyway. I'll leave it at that. I've got a memory blank on that one. But they also use these things, and also to turn people into animals. Goodness. Apuleius, the Golden Ass, that's what it's called. Yeah, it's a play called The Golden Ass by the Roman writer Apuleius. But these ideas from Greek and Roman culture, combined with ideas of the wild hunt through the night, the night flights, of deities like the Valkyries and so forth, or semi-deities, and what you got in the Middle Ages and the early modern period was belief in witches who could fly, and there's fairly strong evidence linking their flight to potions that they made and applied, sometimes drank or applied to their membranes, to different soft membranes, which is what's happening here. And once again, you can see the big pots of drugs. And here more clearly as well. So there's this link between European witchcraft and these plants, one of which is the thorn apple. And again, there's this whole... it was assumed by a lot of early modern writers that this plant was originally African and introduced by gypsies into Europe. But then there are also botanists that believe it was introduced from North America to Europe much later. So there's some confusion about that. But that's amongst the plants that was said to be used by early modern writers, early modern medical writers, commenting on witchcraft, because some of them have observed it. There's a fellow called Johann Weyer, a German physician from early modern anyway, and he had actually first-hand witnessed women making these potions and applying them, making these ointments and applying them. So there's fairly good support for that. This is a painting of the Don Juan character, the Carlos Castaneda character, Herba del Diablo, the devil's plant, the devil's herb, which in the Castaneda stories is a kind of a plant ally of a very ambivalent nature, a potentially very destructive and seductive plant ally. And behind her is Datura noxia, which she embodies and expresses. She has these wonderful Datura flower earrings. and fawn apple necklace. But these plants have been used by American cultures over quite a wide area of North and Central America in magical and initiatory rites. This is Datura discolor. They've been used by the Zuni, amongst whom they're thought to be the exclusive property of rain priests, of the Zuni rain priests. And they're used to intercede. They were used to intercede with the ancestors for rain. So they're used as a spiritual channel to supernatural forces. And this is fairly consistent for solanaceous plants wherever they occur. This is Datura pubiflora from Chile, also considered a plant of sorcery. Cilantro guttata and Cilantro longiflora, two related plants from Mexico. These plants have an interesting place in the religion of the Huichol people. Here's Cilandras growing on cliffs. Some Cilandras were thought to be especially supernatural and inhabited by very, very special spirits. And these plants were called kiri, are called kiri. In this yarn painting, a shaman is gaining power through his interaction with these Cilandra plants. In this painting, some Huichol people are actually making a sacrifice. They're sacrificing a bull to the Cilandra plant, to a particular Cilandra plant thought to be inhabited by a kiri spirit. So here the plants that induce delirium are enmeshed in very, very deep religious practices involving sacrifice, blood sacrifice in this case. And these Cilandras are closely related to a favourite of tropical and subtropical horticulture, Cilantro Grandiflora, which some of you may have seen, no doubt. One of the most amazing groups of these plants are the tree daturas or brugmansias. There are quite a few different species throughout South America, although they're widely distributed now because of their beauty. There are some very unusual forms of these in South America, especially in the Sibundoy Valley in Colombia, the most remarkable of which is this calibra, or Misquay barachero, a incredibly deformed brugmansia. I mean, if you look at the preceding one, normally it's one whole kind of funnel-shaped corolla, and these ones are highly split. This is a really rare cultivar, also with extremely long, thin leaves that are very crinkly, and the corolla is cut almost to the base. And not only is this an unusual form to look at morphologically, but also chemically, it seems to have been, it's very popular with serious medicine people because it's extremely powerful and has a really remarkably high level of scopolamine in relation to some of the other alkaloids. So it's been selected for pharmacological reasons as well as for its unusual morphology. This is a shaman who specializes in brugmansia, Salvador Chindoya, I think his name is. And this is a calibra that flowered in my garden a couple of weeks ago. Absolutely beautiful thing. Incredibly long leaves, really long leaves. So quite different from the usual brugmansias, all of which are just amazing. These plants are also in the Solanaceae, and I'm not sure what they contain, but they're often grouped in with these ones, these tropane-containing plants. I don't think it's clear, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it's clear quite what's in these. They're sometimes added to ayahuasca, apparently, as well. This is Iochroma fuchsioides, which is often mistaken for Iochroma cochineum, and I can't tell the difference. They're very, very similar.
I think there's a little bit of scopolamine or the basic tropane.
It is?
Or some of, yeah.
Yeah, right, okay.
I've actually got an extract which seems to show very high concentrations of some alkaloids. So.
Okay, right. Because I heard conjecture about with phenoloids as well, but yeah, it would make sense. The few accounts that I've seen of the inebriation makes it sound like an anticholinergic thing. Yeah. Brugmansia suaveolens, a more lowland species of Brugmansia. Sometimes added to ayahuasca, but I'm not sure what sort of dose they use, and I'm not quite sure what the idea is, whether it's for anti-nausea or as a synergist, or quite why it's added. I'd love to know more about that, though. Here's a picture from Pablo Amaringo of the interaction of various plant allies. There's the Banisteriopsis vine, the ayahuasca coming down, spreading its aura over these people who've drunk ayahuasca, and the tobacco plant in the form of a bird flying up there, and the chacruna plants in the foreground. And here's Toei, Madame Toei, the Brugmansia plant, as a kind of a very, very powerful plant spirit interacting with those other ones. It's often given a feminine persona. It's fascinating the way that happens. You know, that something has either a feminine or masculine persona, and it's of a particular personality, a particular type. One of the major uses, we've looked at a lot of different uses that these plants have, but one of the major ones is in, shamanism and out-of-body experiences, flight, spiritual flight, but also initiation rites. Very important in a wide range of initiation rites, that these things punctuate the life process. Here, Shua person. These are given at the time when people are thought to go from childhood to adulthood. And that's really quite common. With the Shua, it's often said to be a matter of finding a spirit, a particular kind of spirit that the child has to contact in order to become adult. The idea of contacting spirits through the solanaceous plants is fairly widespread. Here, a Huichol person is interacting with animal spirits through the aid of the kiri plant. So it's a way of facilitating that contact with a spiritual ally. And perhaps in European witchcraft too, there was an element of initiation involved in these, and also of contact with animal spirits. There's all these stories of familiars linked into the witchcraft complex. So there's an analogy between these different rites in these different places. Also the Algonquin of Northern America transition into adulthood was marked ritually with the consumption of solanaceous plants that induced delirium. These are very, very harsh rites of passage, very, very severe rites of passage, ordeals really. The use of Datura in ordeals is quite widespread. Here is these women in southern Africa are also going to, at the climax of these rites, ingest Datura to mark the rite into adulthood. So it's a kind of ceremonial death. There's a desire to leave one part of life behind, and really the way to do that is to die to that part of life. So as a way of very nearly dying, these things are used in rites of passage. Here's another plant, a really quite interesting plant, used by the Xhosa people and some people of the Sesotho nation in southern Africa. It's not in the Solanaceae family, but its pharmacology is very, very similar. So it is a plant that can induce a delirium. When people are poisoned with this bulb, and it's often used as a means of suicide and homicide, the symptoms they present are identical to the anticholinergic syndrome. And I think the main alkaloid, bufenadrine, has demonstrated anticholinergic effects. Also used for rites of passage into adulthood. Regardless of the form of the drug, when it has certain symptoms, certain properties, it has these uses that have been found by really widely spread people. And so it's little wonder that we get a lot of people who are at the end of their childhood experimenting with this kind of drug, because it functions as a way of cutting childhood from adulthood, as kind of cutting the thread of life at a particular point to punctuate it. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if there was an initiatory sub-theme to teenagers getting loaded on Dramamine or loaded on Angel's Trumpet. That what they're seeking, in a sense, is something that functions to mark their transition into adulthood. This is a controversial stele from Egypt showing what might be Datura flowers coming from the sun disk of the god Ra Horkuiti. Maybe, but it's not clear that they were there.
Do you mind if I'll just pass around some Brugmansia and Datura seeds, just so people can see the difference between them?
Brugmansia and Datura seeds? Yeah, sure. Again, just do not eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's
the name of that succulent-looking thing that you were showing earlier?
Oh, which one?
The one that
The one that was in a different category.
Yeah.
Oh, the succulent thing. Sorry, yeah, that's Bourbane.
Cortex was used. You were saying.
Yeah. The bulb is used. Yeah, Bourbane distico. Yeah, it's also used as an analgesic. The scales. Bourbane. That's it depends. The spelling changes because it's a bit confusing, but it's Boophane. Bourbane. Yeah. Sometimes it's Buphane, but usually Boop. Yeah. Bourbane. Beautiful plant too. Really spectacular plant. And
Is that common in general horticulture?
it's available through specialist bulb nurseries, really specialist bulb nurseries, and through some succulent enthusiasts who are really into plants with cordexes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it basically. Yeah, fantastic, really big pink flower, beautiful flower, sort of hydroxycitronelle, lily of the valley kind of fragrance, just great. But really poisonous, really poisonous. Okay, so the substances, the pharmacological properties are really consistent. Like really, if two people presenting with the same kind of poisoning are going to have very similar symptoms. So it's a very consistent kind of substance, but it can be put to all of these different uses, and that really depends on the culture that's using it, whether they're really interested in war on a mass scale, like the United States were in the 1960s, or whether they're interested in aphrodisiac effects or whatever. Really, they are extremely plastic, these substances. They just fit whatever cultural vessel they're poured into, which I think brings us to an issue of the rationality of law as well. What is the point of treating drugs as monolithic categories when they're so subject to different uses? Why have a drug schedule based on this compound, when the one compound can be used for completely contrary purposes, from healing to killing, to arousing people sexually, to making them into living jokes, to kill people through magical means, or to learn to play the violin. Another use that the Huichol put Cilantro Grandiflora to. Kiri is invoked in order to learn how to play string instruments as well. So really, I think there are the idea of having drug categories instead of laws against different uses of drugs is really fraught logically. That perhaps there should be laws about uses rather than drugs.
Motion sickness.
And motion sickness, yeah. Okay, that's really all I wanted to say. So, any questions?
Hold it, Adrian, hold it.
Yeah, I know.
Does anyone else have a question?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, your knowledge of, or if you know anything about solanaceae being used in Chamora with cactus in a tea.
Yeah, they are added to San Pedro potions sometimes, yeah? Yeah, I don't have extensive knowledge of that, but I know that they certainly are added. And I think Simera refers to a whole heap of different plants as well, so it makes it a bit confusing, because sometimes Simera can be different plants. Yeah. But yeah, sometimes it is Brugmansia flowers, yeah. Yeah, good point, I'd forgotten.
Yeah, you're right.
Given that you found the alkaloid sort of profile of this class of compound so ubiquitous among so many plants in so many different human societies, is there maybe a plant which would be more standard in its content of these alkaloids that could be sort of substituted for Datura or Brugmansia?
Quells.
Quells?
Well, you can buy the stuff in a measured dose over the counter at any chemist, and with usually no questions asked. And a reasonable for about, I think, $5, you could probably see double or triple, so 3 times a dose. But yeah.
So it's standardised.
You can have a regimented dose, but finding literature of people who've had experiences and actually known exactly how much scopolamine or atropine is in it is probably a bit more difficult. You would be able to find that information, do it safely.
It would be really interesting to find successful experiences and to look at what people have done right with it. Yeah.
And Aero would thankfully categorise by train wreck experiences or mixtures and combinations, so you should be able to find all of that in there. Aerowood.org.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks very much, Des.